Head coach Paul Maurice let his team have it on practice on Tuesday morning, but here's one thing he's not doing. We'll discuss that and more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Wednesday, November 27th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You follow me on X at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, Florida Panther fans, grateful to be back here on the show once again, even with a little bit of a skid that the Florida Panthers are on, losing 4 straight and 6 out of their last 7. You have to continue to show up and get to work for regardless of what's going on. And same thing with the players. They have to just continue to show up and try to at least break out of everything. And what an opportunity to do so tonight as the Panthers welcome in the Toronto Maple Leafs, which we will discuss more in the segment number 3. But a lot to talk about in these first 2 segments for the Florida Panthers and everything that's been going on in the last 24 hours, especially at practice today. And here to break that all down with me, it's a Wednesday, which means it's a Winans Wednesday edition of the show. Jacob Winans is back here. And Jacob, welcome back. And it's Thanksgiving week is always a little bit out of routine for based on the NHL schedule, with most games Tuesday and Thursday, and it's crazy. I recorded a episode of Pucks and Palms, and then after that recording, no hockey games after, as both games ended at 9:30. So a little bit of a different routine here this week, but welcome back regardless, my friend.
Yep, always good to be here, even though our topics today aren't quite as fun as some of the ones we've been used to over our long time doing this. So, let's get into it.
Yeah, and I want to start the conversation with a little bit of a pulse check from you. A lot can happen in a matter of a week, and usually I ask for a pulse check from my guests. Usually, if things are going right or if things are seem to be going off the rails a little bit. So I want to give you the floor for a little bit on just your overall pulse check on this Panthers team.
Yeah, I mean, definitely not a situation that I would call a panic situation. I think the Panthers have earned the right to not have that panic when they have a tough stretch. It's a team that knows how to win. They've won a President's Trophy, 2 Eastern Conference titles, and a Stanley Cup all in the last 3 years. So it's not like they don't know how to get it done. What concerns me is the apparent lack of effort in a lot of these games, where it almost seems like they just expect the talent level that they have and their reputation to win them a game versus actually going out and winning the game. And I feel like this is a new position for them. They never won a Stanley Cup before, but they're now the hunted. Every single team they play is going to give them the best shot they have. Everybody wants to beat the Stanley Cup champion. And it's not just on the ice. It's every environment they play in is going to be a playoff atmosphere. Look at Winnipeg, for example. That's a team that best record in the NHL, and they had struggled with attendance for the majority of the year. They get to that game, the place is sold out. It's absolutely insane in that building. It's almost like one of their playoff whiteout games. You look at Chicago, that's a team that on paper the Panthers shouldn't even have been messing around with and should have been able to roll all 4 lines and just kind of freewheel it in the third period, because the game should have been put away well before then. And Chicago takes it to you physically, dominates puck possession in the third period, and you can't really score on them. So it's that little bit of a lack of effort and lack of attention to detail that gets you killed when you're a team that everyone is throwing their best at. And then also you take that issue, you pile on the fact that they've been very inconsistent. You got a great winning streak on your record this year, and you also have what's become a really bad losing skid that essentially erased that. That's concerning. You don't want to be so up and down, high and low. You'd like to keep it a little bit level, and have consistency in your game, and we're not seeing that. And then on top of those issues, you've got the defense, which doesn't look great, which we knew was going to take a step back, but they're struggling right now to find offense from the blue line. And when you're not finding offense from the blue line, the defense has to be rock solid from the blue line. It hasn't been. The second pair has struggled mightily. Aaron Ekblad and Gus Forsling haven't been quite as good as what we've become accustomed to. And then on the third pair, no one has really stepped up to take that lead role for that pairing. It's Schmidt, Balinskis, and Boquist, and none of the three have really shown anything to be considered the regular. And then if you go a step beyond that, now you've got Bob having his worst year as a Florida Panther. He's statistically the lowest goals saved above expected in the entire league out of 77 ranked goalies. He's having a very uncharacteristically bad season. And then you've got guys like Carter Verhaeghe, Matthew Tkachuk, and others who were accustomed to really, really driving play and scoring are not scoring, and they're not driving play, and they're turning the puck over, and they're making silly mistakes, and the offensive production isn't there. So if you ask me my pulse check, it's not vibes are not great right now because there's so much going wrong. But by the same token, it feels impossible for this much to be going wrong over the course of a full season for a team that's proven themselves. You have to assume that some of these things are going to turn themselves around. Bob is not going to be the worst goalie in the NHL. Verhaeghe is not going to go the next 20 games only scoring 3 goals. Matthew Tkachuk is not going to stay under a point per game over the course of an entire season. These are some things that are eventually going to fix themselves. It's just you'd like to see it sooner rather than later, and the only way to fix it is to dig out of this hole with effort. And I feel like the effort hasn't been there. So that's really the only main cause of concern is just the effort level for me.
Yeah, and we with Carter Verhaeghe and Matthew Tkachuk's analytics in favor of them, you expect some type of run that they're gonna go on, hopefully for them. And you spoke about not getting offense from their defensemen. I mean, when you lose a guy like Brandon Montour, I mean that's also the product of the salary cap and just how great parity is in this league. Which we as if we take the Florida Panthers glasses off, that's what makes the league so great. When it comes to parity, you don't want the same teams winning over and over again. For that, we as Panther fans are obviously a little selfish. We want that obviously every single year. But also, thankfully, the majority of the Panthers' tough stretch of their schedule it's not almost done, but it's they've had some of the toughest strength of schedule to start. And what if I told you that in the next 60 games, the Florida Panthers have the second easiest strength of schedule coming up? So I think, and you're facing 2 tough teams in these next 3 games, including Carolina on a back-to-back. So that's also a little bit of a little hope going down the line. And to think that it's happening with only 3 points behind the Toronto Maple Leafs, although the Leafs do have a game in hand on the Panthers here. So it seems as if hopefully the Panthers are able to hopefully break out of this stretch.
Yeah, it's definitely not a situation where I feel like it's a lost cause. I mean, the offense is an issue right now, but I don't expect it to stay this dry. Barkov and Reinhart have really carried the entire offense of late. Eventually, Tkachuk, Verhaeghe, they're going to get it going. Bennett he won't stay as hot as he did to start the year, but he'll start to produce again. And Anton Lundell has cooled off a ton. I think he'll get it going again. And then just some of that depth scoring, the Erods, the Etus, those guys, the Mackeys. Mackey's starting to come into his own a little bit. So the scoring will start to come in. It's just the goaltending and defense. These are tough teams you're playing against. And the defense is pretty unproven. There's a lot of guys that are playing that just haven't had to shoulder those huge minutes against good teams yet. And we saw this early with Brandon Montour when he was first brought in. He was in a sheltered third pair role for a long time before he really got his breakout chance. And I think eventually there's enough talent in that area on the blue line. There's enough talent there for someone to step up and take it. I just think it's a tough time to be growing into that role when you're playing so many really good teams to start the year. The only thing that concerns me having that easy strength of schedule for the home stretch the rest of the year is in a lot of ways it seems like the Panthers play better when the competition is hard. It seems like they have some extra juice when it's a game that just kind of means more, when it's a rivalry game or a division game or a recent playoff opponent. They seem to get up for those games. We saw the Panthers dominate Boston in Boston without your two best players, and took it to them. So we know what they're capable of. It's just they haven't really consistently brought that same level of effort. And I guess we'll discuss in the next segment what can be done to get that back a little bit. But that's it. It's not a talent issue right now. It's an effort issue. And I think if they can turn up the effort, maybe it helps that they're playing some good teams and some recent playoff opponents in these next couple of games, because they seem to take those a little bit more seriously.
No doubt. And we will segue to segment number 2, where we'll discuss more about what Paul Maurice said to his squad during practice, but something that he's not in the direction he's not going in. We'll discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Built Rewards. And it's a PSA for everyone who rents. If you haven't heard of Built, you're about to thank me. Earning points on rent is now a reality when you pay your rent through Built. You don't even have to check your landlord to start earning points that you can use towards flights, hotels, stays, fitness classes, and even your next rent payment. Let me break it down for you. There's no cost to join Built, and as a member, you'll earn valuable points on rent on your everyday spending. Built points can be transferred to your favorite hotels and airlines, and even the ones you haven't heard of. There are over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels and properties around the world where you can redeem your Built points rewards. Points can be redeemed towards a future rent payment and unique experiences that only Built members can access. Start earning points on rent you're already paying by going to joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNHL. That's joinbilt.com/LockedOnNHL. Make sure to use our URL so they know that we sent you. Joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNHL to start earning points on your rent payments today. Also, this episode is brought to you by Game Time. And Game Time is the best ticket marketplace out there. The Game Time Picks curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concert, comedy, theater, and more. The all-in pricing, if you toggle this feature, it shows you the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. And the lowest price guarantee or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. And I'd like to thank you guys once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Winans Wednesday edition of the show. And Jacob, more on the Florida Panthers and recently for what's been going on with them. And now this has been a little bit of a slide for them, where now the coach is starting to let the guys hear it, and doesn't come as a surprise based on what his press conference after the game on Monday really it indicated with his really short answers, but also a little bit of a practice update. Anton Lundell did not, and Dmitry Kulikov did not practice, but both guys are fine. Lundell dealing with the issue from Monday with the stitches, and Kulikov went to the dentist. And also Jonah Gadjevich is no longer in a non-contact jersey. But also congratulations to head equipment manager Teddy Richards on being part of Team USA for the Four Nations for him. So congratulations to him. But I want to play this clip from Paul Maurice, but Colby Guy of pucksandpalms.com tweeted that Maurice for about 20 minutes was throwing some F-bombs right at his team. So as a way to just get their attention. So when asked about that, here is what he had to say.
There's a balance to it. I think we're just the idea that we'll get back to feeling good. It's not happening for our team this year, so we might as well just get used to it. Right? We've been to Finland and back. We're going to play 4 sets of back-to-back games, I think, in January. We got 3 to finish our 3 sets and 9 games in 15 days to finish. So we're not feeling good this year. So once we get that out of your head, we'll be all right. One option is you don't like the way your team plays, so you take them out and you bag skate them. That's foolish. Right. They haven't earned that. That makes no sense. The old bag skate to me is like one of the first signs. It works every once in a while, especially with a younger team. But you clearly don't have your handle on it, so you're going to take them out, make sure the media knows how tough and mad you are, and you're going to skate them into the ground. That's not what I don't like the way we're playing. I got to find a way to get them. On the other hand, you don't do anything, right? You can, well, you might be a little bit tired, a long trip to Finland. We're not doing that. So get to work.
So it basically tells me that when the fact that he's not going in the direction of a bag skate, if you were to do that, it would kind of signal to the world that he would maybe lose a little bit of a sense of control in the locker room. But also for this group, it's player driven. And you don't have to motivate the veteran leaders on this team. So I really like the direction that Paul Maurice went in the practice, according to what the guys there tweeted and what he said in the media availability. Your thoughts on that?
No, I absolutely agree. I know we in the past we've seen the team go through these bag skates. We saw it under Coach Quenneville shortly after he took over when he wasn't happy with the effort. We've seen Paul Maurice not necessarily bag skate a ton, but just kind of give them some really, really hard practices when the slumps are happening or when the effort level is not there. I think that the team in general is kind of past that bag skate phase. This is, like we discussed, this is a Stanley Cup champion. This is a team that's won everything there is to win in the last 3 years. And naturally, there's going to be some loss of motivation. There's going to be some loss of energy. There's going to be some loss of drive. Mm-hmm. That happens. They call it the Stanley Cup hangover. I'm not saying that's what the Panthers are going through, but right now it's a team that's played a lot of hockey and they've accomplished everything that they've wanted to accomplish in the last couple of years. So it's about refocusing and finding the motivation to go for what's next. And I think right now that's lacking a little bit. And Paul Maurice has a good understanding of how to sort of recalibrate those guys. And it's definitely not with the bag skate. I think you don't like how that looks to everyone else. If he bag skates this team, it's headlines everywhere. Oh, the Panthers are in trouble. They're bag skating. The defending champions are bag skating. It must be issues in the locker room. Must be lack of effort. Must be bad leadership. Whatever. All these things that pop up. Just the Panthers aren't the under the radar team that they used to be, where something like that doesn't make headlines. So that's one thing. You don't need to add any unnecessary fuel to this fire or negative media attention and give them another thing to think about. But at the same time, you got to get back to hard practices, which is what happened here. The training camp style practices that the Panthers have under Paul Maurice have been really, really good about starting the year, coming out of those difficult training camps, and the effort level is usually there. And I think where that's concerned, that can help them to sort of just get a fresh start and practice the old saying of practice how you play. I think having a hard practice will lead into them playing a hard game. But I think overall, it's just about hammering home the seriousness of the situation. The play hasn't been good. The effort hasn't been good. You're going to come to practice and you're going to work, because you're not just going to coast here, because then you're going to coast in the next couple of games too. So it's, I like the way he handled it. And I think the calls for a bag skate were a little bit unnecessary and premature.
Yeah. And even Gustav Forsling spoke about after the practice is like saying, quote, "That's what we need right now. And it starts in practice. So just continuing to set the tone." And Paul Maurice has set the tone multiple times for when he lets his team have it. I mean, obviously in the bench against the Toronto Maple Leafs back in March of 2023, that led to that 6-1-1 run for them. There was also one in I believe it was either November or December against the Seattle Kraken at home in 2022. But also let's also go back to late December of 2022 when they're on a back-to-back against Montreal where they scored 7 goals, and then the very next day they go to Carolina and they get boat raced where they allow 3 power play goals against, and then instead of that day off in between that and the Rangers game, they go ahead and practice where it's usually a day off for them when they're going that. And also Paul Maurice has been humble in all of this and going through the whole taking blame himself and living up to the whole coaches lose games with the players win them. So that's another thing about that. And also speaking about how he spoke a little bit about how this team has done it before. That's the only part I maybe would have left out because it's maybe a way of, if you leave that part out, it might send the signal that to not just get comfortable here. That's kind of like my mindset behind all of that. If you leave that part out for them, but at the same time, it's for this team. It's the tone has already been set for this week, and also it's the schedule in this week for how their home and home is scheduled against the Carolina Hurricanes, in my opinion, might be a little bit of a luxury because they'll be traveling to Raleigh on the day of Thanksgiving instead of starting at home where you're eating a whole bunch of Thanksgiving dinner and probably laying down on the couch watching football. So instead of that, you're packing your things and you're getting on a plane. So you have a chance to be on the road together and to get ready and to get your mind right for a game. I know we're looking a little bit ahead later in the week, but I think it's truly a luxury because let's not forget what happened last year with coming out of Thanksgiving. The Panthers were their legs were behind them when in that home game against the Winnipeg Jets after Thanksgiving. We didn't really see we saw the Jets really focus on that one, and I think it's a big luxury.
Yeah, I mean, last year was tough. I was actually at that game against the Jets, and they looked pretty awful in that one. But it wasn't just them. It was I forget how many of the home teams in the NHL. I think all but one, maybe 2 home teams that day lost the day after Thanksgiving because everyone's in the same boat. You're home, you're chilling with your family, you're eating a bunch, you're watching football, and then you're not thinking about that game tomorrow. But the road teams, they have nothing but that game to think about. So. Yeah, you come out and you're not prepared. So I think the Panthers are in a better spot this year to do the opposite of what happened last year. And then, like you said, I do kind of agree with the sentiment that you would want to leave off in that discussion with Maurice. You don't want to give them the out of we've been here before, we'll find our way out of it, because that's not an automatic. That's not a given. Just because they've done it before doesn't mean they're going to do it again. And then also we have to remember that a lot of the guys on the team right now haven't done it before. Yeah. Specifically on the blue line. There's guys that are playing big minutes on the blue line that haven't been on the team or haven't played big roles in digging themselves out of some of these holes. And also with the depth forwards, guys who haven't been here and done this before. So every year is a new team. This is a new group, and it's, aside from the leadership on this team, it's those guys have been there before, but you can't give that experience to someone else. They have to earn it themselves. And I think that's the crossroads that they're at right now. So we'll see how they address it.
And it all starts, and once again, it continues tonight with a big Atlantic Division showdown at home against the division-leading Toronto Maple Leafs, which we will preview that and more in the next segment here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and get ready to tackle the NFL action with America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. And if you have a great feeling that the Dolphins are going to go into Green Bay and get a win, you could place all of your bets there on FanDuel in a must-win situation for them to keep pace with the wild card race. So when you get 100 in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bet. Join FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Third and final segment here on this Wednesday, November 27th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, here with Jacob Winans as we discuss more of this stretch. And now we turn the page as we preview tonight's game for the Florida Panthers against the Toronto Maple Leafs, a non-nationally televised game for the Panthers that starts at 7:30. So a little bit odd. It's just been an odd week overall with the schedule. So 7:30 puck drop on Script Sports for you guys in the area, ESPN Plus if you are outside of the area for South Florida. But Jacob, this Toronto Maple Leafs team, I wasn't expecting them to lead the division for them, but I mean a lot of changes for their roster. New coach in Craig Berube, a proven winner for them. But even lately, they've been winning without Austin Matthews. I think they've won 7 out of 8, and he's probably expected to be back in the lineup tonight. But also a lot of changes on the blue line, bringing in our good old friend Oliver Ekman-Larsson on the blue line, who's actually playing on the top pair with Morgan Riley. Chris Tanev, a shot blocking defenseman who just eats pucks there. But also, where the league save percentage is around 900 around there, both of their goaltenders, Joseph Woll and Anthony Stolarz, Stanley Cup champion Anthony Stolarz with the Panthers, both have over 922 save percentage. So it's all starting with defense, something that the Florida Panthers did when they won their Stanley Cup. So, and we saw a little bit of a sign of the Maple Leafs starting to play a little bit of defense in their first round series against the Boston Bruins. If they were fully healthy, I thought that the Maple Leafs would have actually won that series against Boston, but they were dealing with their fair share of injuries to Nylander, Matthews, and even Joseph Woll there for them. But man, this Leafs team, and I didn't even mention Steven Lawrence, who is Daily Faceoff has him playing on the fourth line for them. So a different team. I'm not ready to say that they are cup contenders yet. They have to prove in the playoffs, but so far so good, as they're looking really damn good this season. How are you looking at this?
Yeah, it's gonna be a really tough one, because it's one team that's red hot right now and firing on all cylinders and potentially getting back their best player, and another team that's reeling and struggling and hasn't really found their groove yet. So it's a good matchup because of the history, the talent on the ice, and just two teams that are always in the playoffs, always competing for the Atlantic Division, and it's kind of a growing rivalry. I tend to hesitate to call anything a rivalry when it's really one-sided, and the Panthers have had all the success that the Maple Leafs haven't. But I do think it's a rivalry because it's a game that's taken really seriously on both sides. Toronto has improved their depth. They've prioritized depth scoring that can play both ways. So it's not so much just trying to outscore everybody every night. They've got their bottom six forwards play a gritty, hard-nosed style. They forecheck, they cycle, they hit, they block shots, and then their blue line is much improved. And you're seeing that with two goalies who are relatively unproven. Anthony Stolarz, of course, Stanley Cup champion. We absolutely love Stoli, the goalie. He was fantastic last year. Led the NHL in save percentage and goals against. But again, sheltered role, limited role. No playoff games except for the one blowout game in Edmonton. So it's a guy who's unproven. And then Joseph Woll is a young goalie who hasn't had a ton of playoff success himself. So goaltending was the big question mark. And they've sort of answered that so far this year just by playing incredible team defense. And that's sort of the strategy that the Panthers have taken the last couple of years. And they took some of our players in the offseason that I'm sure are imparting a little bit of that wisdom and knowledge. So it'll be an interesting matchup. But I think it's a good chance for the Panthers to have to get into a tough game. It's one they're going to have no choice but to take seriously, or you're going to get embarrassed on your own home ice. And nobody wants that. So I think they'll come out firing. It's going to be really fast paced. It's going to be really physical. These games against Toronto always are. And I feel like this year, Toronto at least looks more up to the challenge than they have in the past. This is not the same Maple Leafs team that you're just going to push around and bully all over the ice.
Yeah, and the season series for the last few years have been split, so it hasn't been one team taking the reins from one another. And first matchup in this one, where the next three in this season series, all the rest of the three will come in March and April. So those will be definitely the more important matchups. Not to take away from tonight, but as the division race hopefully is a little closer then,
and post trade deadline as well.
And post trade deadline for sure, but also the drama that was going into the season with Mitch Marner and everything with his contract. He set the tone early about not talking about it, but also John Tavares has stepped up on that top line when Matthews has been out last year of his deal, which there's a chance that he could come back on a lower cap hit for the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's a hometown guy as well as Mitch Marner, so that's money that's going to be used for a Mitch Marner raise. And also that OEL contract. Now, we spoke about the cap going up these next 2 years. That OEL contract could look actually really good based on the term given and the cap hit for them, although he is a little bit on the older side. So maybe a pretty good calculated risk by Brad Treliving there in Toronto. So and not only is Austin Matthews out, and and they were playing well. Matthew Nyes was recently came out of the lineup after getting a concussion off the hit from Zach Whitecloud. Max Pacioretty, poor guy, he just can't stay healthy for him. Calle Yarncrook has been out, and the suspension from Ryan Reeves after the brutal check to the head of Darnell Nurse, which we've had our fair share of words on Ryan Reeves on him, but still doing it regardless of guys missing out of the lineup. And we spoke about it with the Panthers on their depth even earlier this season and even last year. But again, it's another team that has just shown up. From their depth has definitely shown up.
Yeah, and they've started to cycle in some of these young guys that they've called up from their AHL team, the Marlies. They've I can't for the life of me pronounce his last name, but Nikita Grabenkin or something along those lines. It's a tough Russian name, but he's been awesome in his couple of games. I don't know if you saw his interviews, but they've already taught him back check, forecheck, paycheck. And,
yes,
I forgot about that. His first phrase in English, but he's been really, really good. I think they've had Fraser Minton come in and play, and he's already scored a goal on the season. So some of their depth players have stepped up. Some of their young guys have stepped up. They've developed pretty well within their pipeline and have guys who are able to contribute. Bobby McManus played well, so they've got some dudes on that team, and they've been able to play really well with Austin Matthews on the shelf. So getting him back, I don't think that's gonna upset the way they've played. I think it's only gonna enhance the way they're playing. And their blue line is, like we said, much improved. OEL has looked great on their top pair, and we've talked about this, that guys come to Florida, revitalize their career, pick up new ways to play and develop sort of a winning style. And then a lot of those guys end up going elsewhere to get paid because the Panthers can't afford to keep them after they develop them. And OEL, won't say the Panthers developed him because he's on the back half of his career, but the Panthers absolutely helped him find the style that's going to carry him through the rest of his career. And it's not the power play dominant offensive defenseman who couldn't really do much in his own end that he was in Arizona and Vancouver. He's now a legitimate two-way defenseman that can play in all situations. You can rely on him on the power play. He's not going to be a black hole defensively. And the Panthers helped him find that game. And it's just unfortunate that he had to sign with a division rival, but we're happy for him. Definitely. It'll be good to see the trio of Stanley Cup champions, OEL, Stephen Lawrence and Anthony Stolarz back in the building. I'm sure they'll be honored appropriately. And yeah, it's I just wish they were in a different uniform. If you're going to win a cup with the Panthers and sign elsewhere, please go out west. That's all I ask. Head to the Western Conference.
hey, but Can't blame them on getting the bag. So congratulations to all three, and also Stephen Lawrence on getting past the PTO phase for the Toronto Maple Leafs and actually getting a sustained roster spot. So congratulations to him.
Absolutely.
Too. So all three, can't wait to see them honored tonight from Amerant Bank Arena. But Jacob, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast as we spoke about what happened for the Panthers at practice and previewed this game for the Florida Panthers against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Tell everybody where they can follow you online, my friend.
Yep, you can follow me on X at Jacob Winans 8, and won't be at the game tonight, but you'll definitely see me at the arena for some of these other ones on this homestand over the Thanksgiving break. Let's get back in the win column. I'm tired of this.
Let's do it. So thank you so much, my friend, and see you next week.
Looking forward to it. Thanks.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Jacob Winans, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.